All right, we are now live. The one thing I do need to figure out, though, is how to take the screen off. Again, I always forget how to do this. All right. There we go. Okay. All right, it's me again, Jeff Gaylord from Jmg Reptile. Today we have a special podcast. We're covering Sambo's, the Southeast Reptile Show. First things I'd like to do, though, is a shout out to our sponsors, the Reptile Super Show, one of the best expos in the whole nation. If you haven't been, you should definitely go. There's Pomona in Anaheim. It's near LA. And they're extremely awesome venues, lots of good breeders, really great place to network, and definitely a show you must attend if you're able to. And then a big shout out to US ARC, fighting for our rights to keep and breed the reptiles that we love, and not only keep and breed, but also just for hobbyists. If you are a breeder, keeper, hobbyist, or even if you have an interest in reptiles and amphibians, as well as other exotics, you should definitely be supporting US ARC. They fight for our rights to keep all the species that we hold near and dear. So we're going to bring on both our guests. So we're adding Dave.
Yo.
And we're adding Rufus Darden. Rufus, what's your actual name? I can't remember.
Yeah, so my first name's John. My middle name is Rufus, but I go by Rufus. So that's it.
Yeah, I thought that was because of Rufus's like Samboa. So what a interesting middle name. It's
coincidental, yeah.
Yeah, premonition there. And then we have Dave. Dave, how's your audio? It was a bit choppy before.
Is it better now?
That's all right.
Nah. Okay. Well, if I sign out eventually and sign back in, can you get me there?
Yeah, you're all right for now. I just stay in for a second.
Okay.
All right, and then I got to get the comments up to see if we have any people in here. Oh, wait. I almost hit the end stream. That would have been bad. All right, John. So how long have you been keeping and breeding reptiles in the first place? And if Sambo is the first species you started with?
Yeah, I've been keeping reptiles almost my whole life. You know, I guess it started out, as a kid, I'd go out and hunt snakes and lizards, especially salamanders in the wild. And I kept those for a number of years. And then later when I was in high school, I met someone that really a mentor of mine, the late Tom Harbin. And he kind of got me into the captive breeding side of things and the herpetoculture, I guess. And so he took me to one of my first shows, first big show, I guess, out in East Texas, I guess in Houston. And that's where I bought one of my first sand boas in the late 90s.
That's cool. So your first mentor is Tom Harbin. That's excellent to hear because, of course, we all love Tom Harbin. He was a really, really nice guy and somebody that was very enjoyable to talk to and definitely a really cool person and somebody that was very, honest. You could tell that they were, in it because they loved keeping and breeding reptiles.
Absolutely. I was very fortunate to get to know him and I guess I grew up in the same hometown there in Manchester, Tennessee, where he had his practice.
Okay, so your first species then of interest was Samboas, and that's what you've been currently pursuing is all different species of Samboas.
Yeah, on the herpetoculture side, once I got in the 90s, I did start with Samboas, but I also kept a number of other species, bred a few ball pythons, hognose snakes. Messed with some other colubrids. I bred blue tongue skinks. And so a little bit of everything along the way, but I've always, the one constant, I guess, has been Samboas. And so I just, they really fit my lifestyle probably the best.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I've seen the Russian black Samboas you have, the melanistic phase, and then Dave seen them too, because we were both talking about those cool things that we seen at the show. And then my girlfriend, Crystal, we all said the same three things of the coolest thing that we seen there. What's some of the interesting species that we seen at the Southeast show? And we all said the black phase Russian Samboas.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I really love those Russians. They're very unique, I guess, in regard to the Samboas. I think they're great to keep.
And their care and everything's similar to Kenyan Samboas, isn't it?
They are. You can keep them pretty much the same. However, when it comes to breeding requirements, there's a little bit of difference there. But if you are set up to keep Kenyan sand boas, then you're probably pretty much on track to keep Russian sand boas as well.
See.
Okay. When did the Russians come into the hobby?
They probably came into the hobby. I know they were in the hobby in the 90s. It may have been before that, Dave. Because I know the Russians that I got were from Bruce Miller and Jeff Holloway. And I guess Jeff, he got his from Bruce Miller and Lloyd Lemke, I believe. And then if you go back, look at Bruce Miller, he got his from Lloyd Lemke and Dave Barker, I believe. And so that goes back into the 90s, I think.
Okay. And are they commonly imported, or when was the last time new blood came in for that?
As far as I'm aware, they've not really been imported recently. I've not seen any new blood since I've been working with them. And I guess I've been working with them since around 2006 or 7, somewhere around in there.
Okay. And the reason I bring it up is, some people know you guys got the T positive albino that popped up randomly. And we spoke about it a little bit at the show. I think you mentioned, 6 different breeders have already had that happen. So I'd assume you guys started from really small stock and there was just head albinos floating around there if you guys 6 different guys that have them so far.
I think so. Yeah, we must have had related stock, I would say, and that gene just floating around in there,
Okay. You said the original Russian Sambos are from Kazakhstan. Your lineage are all of them from Kazakhstan, or just the mountainous?
No. Yeah, so that's interesting. They have a really wide range. I mean, the Russians, they range from, if you were to go like east to west, maybe you start over in the edges of China and Mongolia, and you go 2,000 miles over into Iran and Iraq. That's their range.
That's large.
It's a very expansive range, but the black ones seem to mostly be centered around the kind of the northern part of the Caspian Sea. So that does include sort of southern parts of like Russia, I guess it's called Dagestan, and then over into Kazakhstan. And so, just that area has the black Russians, but it has the other phases as well in there. It's not just the black ones, but that's where they come from.
When you say phases, I think I saw a gray phase. Mm-hmm. Now, is that like something that's common in the wild, or is that something else that's popped up in breeding?
I think those probably occur in the wild, the gray phase. I'm not certain. The reason I'm not certain is a lot of them are born with that gray background and the dark banding pattern, and then what happens is over time they go through onto genetic color change, right? They some of them darken up, turn black. Some of them that pattern sort of diffuses and they're sort of a gray and black. So the ones that I call gray, though, are the ones that actually keep that gray pattern into adulthood. And I suppose they probably occur like that in the wild, but it's hard to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because with such a large range, you would expect some locale differences.
Yeah.
Anything else in the Russians that we don't know about that we didn't bring up? Any line bred?
Oh, let's see. In terms of phases and morphs, that type of thing, to my knowledge, the only like recessive, color morph is that T positive that we talked about. And everything else, I just call them phases. They don't seem to kind of breed true necessarily. But you have like cinnamons, grays, black, super black, that kind of thing. And sometimes I'll use terminology like gray-sided, because people will, get in touch with me and they're like, hey, I want the gray-sided ones, and so it's just a way to help communicate about them.
Yeah, because I like those black ones with the white sides, the white speckling. Those look really, really cool. That was an actually pretty awesome looking animal.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. As at the beginning, when you get a litter, to me they're all kind of ugly. They just have either brown and black or gray and black. But then as they go through a few sheds, they start to go through that color change, and some of them turn, super black all the way around, as you guys saw.
Okay. So in a lot of species, when you get those solid black animals, they tend to be one of your best sellers. Is that the case with the Russians?
It is. Yeah. That I would say that's the most sought after. Even over the albinos and that type of thing. Yeah, that super black. That's what most people want when they get in touch with me about them.
What's price point like on that project?
I usually go with just the black phase about $500, and then for super blacks it just goes up depending on how good they look.
Okay, and usually based on age when it comes to that, or just initially how dark they are.
Mostly how dark they are. Now, if they are older, of course, like an older female or something like that, then yeah, I'd start tacking some a little bit more on.
And you said you like, because I remember you asked me about hognose snakes at the show. So you actually kept hognose at one point because you're asking me about mai tais and sunbursts and that combination.
Right.
So
yeah,
when you asked me
they've
that
come
question,
a long way.
Yeah, you're definitely familiar with hognose. So how, like, what's your experience with hognose snakes?
My experience there, yeah. So, I'm trying to think how long ago it was when I bred hognose. I'm just going to give you a guesstimate. Maybe it was 10 years ago or so when I did that. I had like, albinos and axanthics. I had bought some poshead axanthics and produced some axanthics, and then it just had some trouble, I guess, getting those axanthics to continue reproducing, and so I handed those off to my friend Tom Harbin and let him kind of take it from there, and then I just slowly got out of the hogs.
All right, then you went right into Sambos after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I see. Well,
I
yeah,
do like the hog. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say there's I think a pretty decent crossover for people that like Sambos and that also like hognose snakes.
Yeah, I think so. I have a lot of customers, even especially that want the Russians, and they're already keeping hogs. It's easy for them to go right into the Russian sand boas, and then they're also somewhat already set up like with the cooling aspects and that kind of thing to get them to breed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you told me about them, it's kind of like it sounded like their care was like a hybrid between a Kenyan Samboa and a Plains hognose snake. If you were to breed them and everything, you'd want to do a brumation period. I'm sure the Russian Sambos are probably like Kenyan Sambos where they're not drinking very often though. So it's a lot of care. It's probably similar to Kenyan Samboa care, like you're saying. But then, you need to brumate them. I thought that was interesting because I asked you at the show about that, and you said, yeah, the only difference is like brumating them. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. What do you guys brumate your hogs at there? Or how's that work?
I do mid and upper 50s. I've played around a lot though. I've cooled at like pretty much almost every imaginable temperature. Kind of like I've brumated where they've got down into the high 30s, like hit 38, 36 degrees. Yeah. It's not necessary. But I've had them in, climates where I was cooling them where it'd be like in the mid 40s and it'd range into the upper, 50s. And then I had years where the coolest I could like cool them in the specific area I was cooling them was about like 62, 63, and they're ping-ponging between 62 and 68. I found like all those years, they relatively have the same success rate. Now, I've seen some people where they don't brumate them, but most of these people that don't brumate them actually are brumating them. They're just not calling it that. They're brumating them at a warmer temperature. Like they're turning their rack off. They're not really feeding them for like a month or two. They're keeping them right around like 70 degrees. During that whole period, they wouldn't be feeding them. And then they warm them up after this short period, and then they're pairing them. And, that's a brumation. It's just a really, soft brumation, which actually that's a good name for it. That's what I seen Alfred from Patriot Hogs, because he is doing some experimenting where he is showing full cool down and then what he is calling soft brumation. And I'm like, I like that. It's a good term to call it, soft brumation. And, hognose snakes, especially with their large range, brumation temperature I don't think is really that important, but I do for myself, I do like to have them like in the 50s. Keeps their body shut down and then gives them the time for their body to rest and for their body to experience that simulated brumation period. And I have really good success with it, so I continue doing it. But I've cooled in the high 60s before and my success rate was very good. It was on par with the 50s.
See, that's interesting. It's like with the Russians. For a long time, I cooled them pretty hard, and I still do most of them. But some of the other people that breed them don't cool them as hard as I do, and we seem to both have success. So I don't know that it's necessary to cool them down as low as I do, but I like to get them down to about 45. And,
Okay.
And I see like the difference for me, I guess when you refer to like a hard and a soft cool down, a hard cool down for the Russians would be when they go to sleep, and so they like completely stop moving. They're not going to drink. They're just sitting there. And that usually starts to happen once you hit 49 degrees. And almost all of them are, not moving at all by the time you get down to 45. But with I guess a soft cool down, you cool in like 60, 65, something like that. But those animals are still moving around. And with that type, you probably need some water there.
Exactly.
That
Agreed.
kind of thing. So, but both ways, I suppose, work. I've done very little on that side with the soft cool down, though.
So what are you doing to get them down to 45 degrees?
So currently I have a really large wine cooler, and that works really well. I obtained one that keeps the temperature dialed in, say within 2 degrees from top to bottom, front to back. That way you don't run into any issues there. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. Now, years ago, I started out just putting them out in the garage in the wintertime, like putting them in containers and setting them out in the garage here in Tennessee. And, that worked. It worked just fine. I just didn't like the temperature fluctuations, and I had to really pay attention. Like if it got super cold, I might have to go get them out, take the containers out. We also have some unusually warm weather. Sometimes in the winters, in February, it can get up to 70. So we'll throw them right back out of hibernation, And so I was just worried about, eventually getting caught in a mess doing it that way. And so I went to the wine coolers.
Okay. Something else I was going to ask about that. Oh God, I've lost it. Go ahead, Junior. I failed.
All right. Well, yeah, so that's like, so you have like the Arabian Samboas too, which are very rare. And I told you, like, I told you at the show, like I love all snakes. When I seen an Arabian Sambo for the first time, I actually did not like them. It's the only snake I didn't like. But I was like, I was like 13 or 14 at the time, maybe 15. I was somewhere in that age range. But then within like 5 or 10 years, they definitely really grew on me. And I actually think they're really cool now. I think what set me off with like first, because I've never seen or heard of that species before. And their eyes are right like on top of their head, and I thought it looked so weird. And their eyes are kind of like almost look like they're protruding a bit, almost like they're like resting on their head. They almost look like doll eyes or like googly eyes glued on. I'm like, man, I don't like that. But now I think it's a really cool aspect of it. I think it's awesome. And I seen you there, you had one, and it's pretty cool to see people are still working with them, because I feel like there's hardly any of those in captivity. I mean, how many Arabian Sambos are in captivity? Probably less than 100 worldwide.
I mean, in the U.S., I wouldn't hesitate to say, less than 100.
Wow. Yeah, and they lay small clutches too. Isn't it like 3, 4, 5 eggs?
Yeah, it's supposed to be somewhere in that 5 to 8, somewhere in that range. Now, I've had some lay a lot more than that. I had a really large, unusual female that she would lay 22, 23, 24 eggs, something like that.
An Arabian Samboa?
Yeah.
Holy crap. And how do you incubate their eggs?
The best way that I've had experience with is just putting them in one of those hot box incubators, using those. And actually I would set them up in the sim containers. I guess I don't know if you use those for hogs or not. But the two methods that seem to work the best is just doing that sim container with the substrate free, and then also just putting them on either perlite or what is that called? Hatchright, I guess.
Okay.
And that seems to work the best. I've tried other things. I figured sand would work really well. I have never even hatched one on sand, so I'm not doing something right. Yeah.
What temperature are you incubating those at?
About 84.
Okay, 84. Interesting.
84 to 86, somewhere in there.
I feel like there's been people, because I remember like Scott, you know Scott, I can't remember his last name, but he lives in Ohio.
Scott Stark, yeah.
Scott Stark, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I should know that. I've talked to Scott so many times. He used to vend next to me a lot of times at the Cleveland shows because he was a friend of Norm Dam's, and him and Norm Dam would always be there. And he had some Arabian Sambos. And I don't know if it was him or somebody he knew, their first clutch like went bad, and they didn't know if it was an issue they did, because at that time they didn't even know what was the most optimal way to incubate them, because there's only been a few people and only a little bit of information that was like seemed to be available. So that's why I was asking that, because it's like, you know, couldn't imagine getting all that work to finally breed to get good eggs, and it's like, well, how do you incubate these things?
Yeah, I mean, those things, they're super delicate. I don't have a ton of experience incubating eggs. I've hatched out some hog eggs and rat snakes and ball pythons and a few things, but the Arabian eggs are a nightmare to me.
They are.
Because, and they're super delicate. I've had whole clutches go bad. In years past, you know, it was like a couple clutches, all of them would just go bad. And then, you know, you think you figure out what you did wrong, and then you have to wait a whole year to test that out, you know?
Yeah.
See, and make your adjustment from there.
Yeah, you got some comments too. You had Joshua Fisher saying you got some Kenyan Sambo breeder boy from you. And then Texas Biology said, hey, Rufus, it's Chuck. So you got definitely a few people in here.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I've got Winston Smith texting me, but it seems to be just talking shit about the way you talk. Not you, Jeff.
Me?
Yeah, he's criticizing you big time.
Who is?
I'll tell you after.
Winston? The fuck do you want me to talk?
No, forget about it. We're on a good roll right now. Okay, I got a question.
Right.
So, what? How long are they in the incubator for?
Oh, how long does it take to hatch the Arabian eggs?
Yeah.
You know, it's at least 60 days. Yeah, 60 to 70, somewhere in there.
I'm sure small eggs like that, you guys don't cut in that community.
You know what? I started doing that in 2020, 2021. What I would do is when I see the first one pip, then I would cut a slit in the rest of them. Reason being because I don't know if you guys know this, they don't have an egg tooth. And so they just have to kind of nose their way out. And, you know, some of those weaker individuals, what would happen is I would get some eggs over the years that just didn't hatch. When I would cut them open, it looked like there was later, like a few weeks later, when they're obviously bad after the hatch dates and everything, I would cut them open and I would see these fully formed Arabians. They just never came out of the egg. And so I started putting a little slit in the egg as soon as I see the first one pop his head out.
Okay. I'm willing to admit I had no idea these things were egg layers. I feel like this is one of those like random things I should have known about, but I had no idea on this.
The Arabian Sambos are. The other ones are live birth.
Yeah, so that's the only one out of all the Sambos that are doing eggs?
There's a Eric's Muelleri. It's the Saharan Sandboa, and it does lay eggs too, but fortunately, the incubation period is only a couple of weeks, and so they lay those eggs, and you can already see the little babies formed in there. And anyway, a couple of weeks later, they hatch out. So it's not as nerve-wracking. Well, I don't want to say it's not as nerve-wracking, but you don't have to wait as long.
Okay. When you any trouble feeders with your babies? Any tricks you need to do, or most of these guys kind of just get started?
With Arabians, it's some of them don't want to eat at first, and you know, there's a couple of tricks there, like using mouse tails, taking a frozen thawed. Maybe if he can't take a red hot pink, then thaw out a frozen thawed and chop his tail off, and use dip it in like a water-based lubricant, slide it down his throat. You know, so you can do that. You do that a couple times, it gets at least enough size on them. They'll be able to take a red hot pink. Now with the Russians, some of those are notorious for being hard starters, you know, and you can just put them in a wine cooler as babies. So you just say if they refuse food, you know, a couple times, put them in a wine cooler for 5 or 6 weeks, dial it down to 45 or 50. And then when you bring them back up, they usually eat.
That's interesting. Yeah, that works for Hognose too. Sometimes it's sometimes brumating the babies to finicky feeders helps.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. You brought that up to me years ago, Junior. And it's common sense too, you know.
I didn't know that there was other species though that people did that with. So that's the first time I heard that somebody did with samboas. Now the Arabian sambos and the Saharan sambos, they lay eggs. Is there any other species of sambo that lays eggs?
Not that I'm aware, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Are there any other boas that lay eggs in any kind of boa? Because that's again something I've never really heard about.
Well, I think
I don't. You got that Calabar's python, sort of an in between.
Yeah, I heard those are more closely related to boas, they say, and they're called a python, the Calabar burrowing python.
But they
that's
lay eggs, so
Interesting. What do you want to talk about now, Junior?
Well, with Rufus, you said you're into herping too, right?
Oh yeah, my whole life, yeah. Especially when I was younger, have had more time to get out and do that kind of thing. But yeah.
Because even from your profile picture, it looked like you were somewhere, even though it was really small, I didn't click on it. It looked like you were somewhere like Costa Rica or, somewhere like that.
Man, you're pretty close. I was in Nicaragua. Yeah.
Okay.
So I've been to a few countries in Central South America and got to do a little herping on the side while I was down there. And it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Nicaraguan boas?
Oh, well, so when I was in Nicaragua, I didn't get to do as much herping as I wanted, and I didn't see any of those Nicaraguan boas until I left, and then they sent me pictures of when they found, like some of the people we stayed with, they sent me pictures. I was like, oh, great, So, no, unfortunately, when I was in Nicaragua, I only saw one snake, and it was dead on the road.
That's right.
Yeah. But I did get to travel to Peru and go down into to the Amazon, and there we did find, I guess it's Peruvian rainbow boas, green anacondas, and that kind of thing. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome to see rainbow boas and anacondas in the wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
Nice. Did you go down with a group of people, or how'd you do that?
I did. That particular trip, it was I went down with it's actually part of a college course, and so for my real job, I guess, I am a biology professor at a community college, and so we get to travel. Sometimes we get to travel, through that doing study abroad programs. And the particular time I went down to Peru, I did sort of a partnership study abroad program with a local university. And so that's how I got to go down there, and it was with a group. And so we were with a big group, but it was part of a tropical ecology class, is what they called it.
Well, all right. What about herping in the United States? You do any herping around here?
Yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, of course, in mostly Tennessee, and I mean, I really love salamanders, especially the envistomatid salamanders. And so I would spend hours when I was a kid catching spotted and marbled salamanders and tiger salamanders. And also I'd go out on, stormy, rainy nights in January just to watch them lay eggs and that kind of thing,
That's really cool. Yeah, because Dave and I, we both herp. I think Dave herps more than I do now. He's always seems to go through going to spots here and there. But yeah, it's a Tennessee. That's like kind of you're like, I know part of Tennessee, at least in like North Carolina, the foothills and stuff have some like the most species of salamander that can be found in one particular area.
Yeah, there's a lot of salamander diversity here, so we're really fortunate in that regard. So, I mean, yeah, I have a blast, going out finding salamanders. But I love finding the snakes too. I was always out catching any snake I run into, and so I love all of it.
Yeah, being in Tennessee, you don't really have a choice but to love salamanders as a herper, though, because that's pretty much all you guys have there.
Yeah, they're in our backyard, Yeah.
That is true, because I see people herping in Tennessee, road cruising and stuff. But Dave, you find a lot of salamanders too. You find like spotteds, and like I feel like there's a lot of them there too. And it's like same with Ohio in the spring.
Yeah, no, the Ohio run is very interesting. That's within a few miles of your old house, right?
Yeah, it's still like close to where I'm at. Yeah, there's a lot of salamanders over there.
Yeah, no, I think that was like a March thing. We usually went to go do that, if I remember right. Maybe it was a little later, but yeah, on a good rainy night in Ohio when it's freezing cold, man, then they get moving. It's pretty incredible. Just such a dense population, such a small area. It's probably one of the cooler places I've been to.
And then we have Texas Biology says there's a breeding population of Brazilian rainbow boas in southeast Florida. The funny thing is, I just seen that a post where they were catching invasives and other herps in Florida. I can't remember the exact post, but there was Burmese pythons, and there's a few other species, and there's a Brazilian rainbow boa, and it was like a fairly healthy looking newborn. And I didn't comment, and they didn't really go into detail or to mention it. I'm like, did they find that in Florida? Because like I don't think they found that in Florida, but Texas Biology is saying that would make sense. That's why it was in that post that Brazilian rainbow boas are reproducing in southeast Florida, or maybe southwest, because that's kind of where the Everglades, or I guess the Everglades covers quite a bit of the southern tip of Florida. That'd be pretty interesting. I'm wondering what they're eating mostly down there. I'd imagine small rodents and lots of invasive lizards.
Yeah. I think I saw a herping video a few weeks ago where this guy was just catching invasives and he pulled a baby off the road. It might have been the same one you're talking about.
Baby rainbow?
Yeah, it was a little baby rainbow. It was off the road. It might have been cruising. It might have been staged, but he was finding like Cuban anoles and all this other stuff. And then he showed the rainbow, I think, near the end, probably a few Burmese pythons. Like you, I had no idea those things were out there. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard of it. That's why I was kind of skeptical too, because of all these guys that hunt for Burmese and invasives, I've never seen or heard of anybody pulling a Brazilian rainbow boa. The one that's always kind of been in question, if it's actually real and there's supposed to be that one locale, is red-tailed boas.
Yeah, that was a movie set or something where a couple animals were released. I think it was like a hybrid between a Colombian and Peruvian, maybe. I don't know, other than maybe a first initial litter, if they've ever found another one, but I think they still refer to them as a certain county of boa. And I know there are people in the industry that sometimes say they actually have one, but I never know if it's real.
Yeah, right. That's what I always kind of wonder.
Yeah, but oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say with the Burmese though, at first I didn't like I don't think a lot of people believed it, because like it's roughly around like 20 years ago, maybe a little longer. Every now and then somebody would come across a Burmese python. And sometimes they'd be really good sized ones, sometimes they'd be moderate size, but it was always, perceived that these were always let loose. And it wasn't until like, I don't know, maybe some people were onto it at that point, but it wasn't really, I don't think, common knowledge for another 5 or 8 years that they discovered like, hey, these are actually reproducing pretty readily in Florida, because nobody's really looking for them, or trying to study it. But I guess once they started getting an abundance of them, something probably set it off where, the Fish and Wildlife Department, started, or an ecologist was doing surveying, and they started discovering like, hey, these things are actually reproducing.
Have you done Southern Florida yet?
Oh, me?
Oh yeah, sorry, we forgot you were here, buddy. Yeah.
No. I've not had a chance to get down in Southern Florida. Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be cool.
All right. So what is the range like for a rainbow boa? Because if there's this many people find them in Southern Florida, they either have to have a small range and are reproducing in a certain area, or there's just a ton of them reproducing.
Well, since I haven't heard of anybody coming up with these before, it'd have to be a really tiny range, or it'd have to be like, here's the thing, you'd think if there was Brazilian rainbow boas though, especially with the laws that have been, a little more strict, and I feel like with prices and everything being like higher in the last 4 or 5 years, it would have had to been something that happened like a decade plus ago if the Brazilian rainbow boa is somehow established. But I really don't see them I wouldn't think they would thrive that well in South Florida, but maybe I'm wrong.
Interesting. Or it could all be a hoax.
Possibly. It was like a fresh, it was like a really young Brazilian rainbow boa. You could see in the person's hand, it was still relatively pale. It hasn't colored up yet. So it was, a few weeks or like a month or two old, probably at best.
Okay. Can I jump back into some Kenyan talk?
Go ahead.
All right. So, I was looking over some of the crosses, and what was that one you had on the top shelf? I believe it was a paradox albino combination.
Oh yeah. At the Southeast Reptile Expo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a paradox albino Jmg paint.
And G-Nex, that's who you guys refer to as just GX, right?
Correct. Yeah, we write it out just GX, and I guess it's just so it stands for G-Nex.
There was something else I saw. Was it like KBS or?
Oh, I may have put some abbreviations on the displays. I might have had like KSB for Kenyan sand boa, RSB for Russian sand boa. Now there are other abbreviations for like morph names too. So I'm not sure what you might have seen there.
So the one that I was looking on top shelf, I really like that just because it had the reduced spots. So you had those really nice white, kind of cream spots from the albino, and then you had those solid black ones kind of floating around it, which I thought was very unique. And with size and spots get bigger, really an attractive animal. Have you guys done any other crosses where you've been able to get like 3 different color spots on there? Because I feel in the past I've seen something like that.
There's calicos, but those aren't reproducible at this point, for us we know. So you can get those where you get kind of that tricolored effect, and but other than that, off the top of my head here, I'm thinking just those paradox albino combos that can do that, like you saw. But that's the only thing. It's the only thing I'm aware of there with something that has dark spots.
Junior, have you ever thought about buying Sambos?
Yeah, after I seen the Russian black ones, yeah, I definitely did. I mean, I have so many. The one problem is I just have so much stuff here currently, and that's what Crystal said. She's like, if you wouldn't have bought so many stupid beaded lizards, maybe you could have bought some of those, because like my quarantine area and everything is like completely filled up. I was like, I gotta reduce some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I have been thinking about those the hypermelanistic Russian Sambos. I like both the black phase and then the black phase with the white speckling up the side. Now, the one thing you mentioned, the Gene X mutation. What's a Gene X mutation in the Kenyan Sambos? What is that gene?
That's something that popped up in the paint lines. So like Jeff Holloway is the originator of the paint morph. And, it's as he was working with it, some of those paints were born without that postocular stripe, also just didn't have any head pattern really. So they just had a really clean head. And then besides having that paint stripe, that stripe down the middle that a paint has, it would that pattern would break up on the lower, third of the body. And so it was a very reduced paint basically. And so so what I guess he and some other breeders thought, and we kind of later have shown here, is that you could separate those genes out. You can get, take that Gene X, and through breedings, you can get Gene X by itself, without the paint. And so it's basically just a very reduced pattern animal, very similar in look to a Dodoma.
Okay, the Dodomas are those like really orange ones with the spaced out spotting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, beautiful animals. Yeah.
So when people label animals, like I think it's Holloway reduced line, is that just? I'm not saying, is that GX and they just call it reduced line, or is that different?
That's different to my knowledge. Yeah, so the HRP is a Holloway reduced pattern, and as far as I'm aware, those like popped up in Jeff's collection with some aneries that he was working with, and so most of, and still today, I mean, most of the HRP stuff you see is anery, and it's a highly reduced pattern, but it's not very predictable, like how much you can get that pattern reduced. Like you can have a whole litter of HRPs. They're beautiful, high contrast between that black and white, very clean whites. However, some of them may not be very reduced at all. And then you can get some really, really extreme pattern reduction on them that almost looks like I don't know, just look, I can't really do it justice to describe it, but kind of like a splash in a sense. But just a little bit different, obviously.
Okay. And how many of these projects are recessive?
Most of them, I think. Off the top of my head, I mean, I'm thinking albino, paradox albino, the hypo, or different forms of hypos.
The GX, that's recessive.
Paint's recessive. Gene X is recessive. Yeah.
So the only ones that aren't are stripes.
The stripe's not recessive. And I think, so I'm not very familiar with with the vanishing as opposed to the splash, but yeah, I believe the vanishing is more of a line bred supposedly, whereas the splash is recessive.
That's interesting. You know, I'm used to species being heavy recessives and colubrids. You don't hear many boas or boa species that are heavy in the recessive column.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead, Junior. We'll tag team this. I'll say
right.
something. You say something.
All right. Well, there seems to be a pretty, like, with the splash. Is there selective line breeding going on with those two? Because I see some different qualities, or they're just higher and lower expressivity of these, you know, this mutation.
Yeah, higher and lower expression. And, you know, a lot of people, of course, they're going for that high expression where you got major pattern reduction, I guess, or the big splash. And so I think that's what most people strive toward. However, you know, you can breed high end splash to splash and you know, still get some low expression stuff.
Okay. Is there any new traits in any of the Kenyan Sambo, or sorry, any of the Samboa species? Is there any new morphs that are, you know, that just aren't out public yet, or much, or they're just not for sale?
So base, like if you're looking at base morphs, I don't think there's not been anything since probably the 2010 to 2013, 14 range, somewhere in there. So, you know, it's been a good 10, 15 years since we've had a good base morph, I think. But there are a lot of combos still yet to be done, and there's some relatively new combos that are pretty cool.
What's one of the newest combos that you think's like something that'd be really exceptional, or something that you think's interesting?
You know, one of the ones that I'm working with there, you guys saw at the show, you know, that Paradox Albino Genex paint. I mean, it's a triple visual combo, and you know, what I like about it is if you compare it to like the Paradox Albino paint, for example, a Paradox Albino paint, you tend to get like a lower expression on that of the melanin, you know, so those little spots are just right along the sides inside the pattern, and not in that dorsal stripe. But if you put the Gene X in there, that kind of breaks everything up, and it throws that pattern across the body there. And so I kind of like that look. Plus, you get that clean head and everything. And so anyway, I like that. And then I just posted on my Instagram a triple visual, and it is I guess you call it like a JPB paint. And so it's expressing Paradox albino, and paint at the same time. So that's it right there. You got it. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to change quite a bit as it matures. You'll see more of the paradoxing as it gets older.
Well, yeah. So what will happen? You can see that when it's kind of a low expression paradox. And what happens is when you put those two forms of albino together, that spot or those spots on there are going to be very light. It's kind of like taking an eraser to the black spots, right?
Yeah, I got you right. Yeah.
So that's almost like a lavender in the whites on that, right?
Yeah, that particular one. Yeah, it's very, very lavender. Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of the goals in Samboa projects are to just reduce the pattern as small as possible, which is not a bad thing. I saw some completely patternless animals that were like neon orange.
Yeah. So I would say you're right. You know, like a lot of the goals is to reduce pattern as much as you can, throw the bright colors in there. People tend to like that kind of stuff. However, you know, you can take some dark animals and mix that like solid animals that are dark. And if you mix that with the different forms of albinism, I mean, you end up with some pretty cool stuff too. So not a lot of that's being done, I don't think, but it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, last thing. I used to stalk Holloway a lot back in the day. I just always appreciated his pictures, and you know, some of that like super reduced pattern stuff with that really bone white and then the reduced black spots, like that little like cow kind of look, I guess, in a way. Like, really love that animal.
Yeah. I like that. And that reminds me like the Anery Gene X paints. I mean, those are, you know, I guess you say widely appreciated. A lot of people really, really like those. And they have that, like you're saying, that high contrast black and white, reduced pattern, a white head with the dark black eyes. I mean, yeah, they're pretty impressive.
I feel like in a species, you know, sometimes you get to a certain combination, you know, you'll never be able to make enough of them. I feel like that's one that's just always going to be like sought after.
Yeah. And he's got it right there. Yeah, that's one of them right there. And
yeah, these are really cool. This is probably one of my favorite Kenyan Samboa mutations right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a top one for me. They're beautiful, you know.
And you can reduce it down even more on the black pigment, right?
You certainly can.
Yeah, I have a couple pictures. I should have sent them to Junior ahead of time when I was stalking people. I think I was on Sambo 69 on Instagram for a little bit.
Yeah.
Poking around. Really unique collection. I like his mixture of colubrids in there. I thought he had some pretty unique stuff.
Yeah. It's so I think that's if I remember right, that's Pam Radsliff. I think she has the HRPs, probably what you saw. I don't know, but I'm guessing if it's it's like black and white, highly reduced.
Yes, yeah,
that's a great example of just a top tier HRP. Yeah. Now the picture he's showing there, that's one of mine there. That's that Paradox Albino G-Nex paint.
Yeah. It's very interesting because the paradoxing is impressive. It's not just a little bit; it's a bunch. Now, do you work with? I don't see them on your Instagram. I'm sure you may have had them at one point. If you do have the Urix Johnai, the Indian Sambos.
I do. I have a few of those, but I don't have a lot of experience. Yeah. I think they're very different behaviorally, you know, than the Kenyans. But I've not worked with them enough to even, you know, I've not done much with them, not much breeding or anything like that. I've only had them for a few years, but they're definitely pretty cool.
And here's some of the. This is third generation GX paints.
Right. Yeah. And that there, I'm just working on reducing that pattern, you know, and so that's those.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't want to sound dumb. Is there albino in any of those? It's a little screen.
Oh, in that picture, no, those are all just that normal color. There's light, and some of them are like that when they're born. And there's a couple in there I can see that, you know, they're going to really brighten up orange as they get older. The mom is just a very deep orange.
Okay.
Yeah, these are pretty cool.
Yeah,
here's an older one.
Yeah.
I think it's the Barkers that started the Paradox Albino.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I think they were the first people to bring them in. So as an import in the 90s, I think it was like 1995 or so. Is when Dave and Tracy Barker imported Paradox Albino, the first Paradox Albino.
Yeah, those are sick.
Yeah, these are really cool. The Henry GX paints.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now you can add splash to that, and that's what's going to reduce the pattern even more?
You can do it that way. Yeah, there's several ways you can reduce that pattern. You can do splash. You can do vanishing. You can, of course, line breed the G-Nex, you know. And so there's several ways that you can trim that pattern down and make it look different.
Yeah, because you said I think there was maybe around 7 genes, and it seems like 5 of them pretty much reduce your pattern down. Arguably, the stripe does the same thing.
I think you're on track there. Yeah.
Just in a different way. Go ahead, Junior. What you got there?
Oh, I was looking at melanistic. That's what started the conversation off. What we were talking about the melanistic Russian Sambos, and the one thing I pointed out to John was like, I really liked this. As adult female, I was like, man, her head structure is like that of like a mini green anaconda. It was like very similar looking to a green anaconda.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, they're cool, and I really like their behaviors too. They're different than the Kenyans and the other species of sandboas.
Are they more active?
They are, yeah, and you guys may know, you know, and the sort of reputation that I guess outside the Samboa community, people just kind of looking in. They're like, oh, they just hide and stay under the sand. You never see them, you know, that kind of thing. And it's actually not true. They're nocturnal. They'll come out, but the Russians, they're out and about a lot more. They'll cruise around. They want to see what's going on. They're always kind of investigating things. They're very, very interactive. And so, like, if you open up an enclosure, those big females, they'll come out wanting to see what's going on, see if you've got food. If not, then they want to make sure you don't have food. And so anyway, they're always just very interactive, which is much different than the Kenyan Samboas.
Which ones are the biggest assholes of the community?
You mean the which species of sandboa? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. We'll throw the word aggressive on there. How about that?
Yeah. So I don't, maybe some of the ones I have less experience, like rough scales, maybe. Um,
Mm.
I've only kept those briefly, and so they were pretty nippy, the ones I had. But that's a small sample size though, so I don't really. I mean, I would just guess them. I'm not real sure though.
Okay, fair enough.
Are the Russian Samboas a better temperament than the Kenyan Samboas?
I think on average they probably are. They're not bitey at all. The only thing, I guess, maybe a downside in the handling is the males. They like to musk, and they won't do that if you handle them very gently. So it's kind of all in the approach. But if you just reach in there and pick one up like you're going to pick up a big female, he's gonna musk you and wipe tail all over you. So that's the downside there. But other than that, I mean, they're pretty cool, and the females are always pretty laid back.
Yeah, most species of Sambo, they all seem like they're pretty, handleable and make. Even the Kenyan Sambos, like I said, like compared to Kenyan Sambos really aren't. I mean, I've had a couple that are nippy because I actually had them for a little while, but yeah, for mostly they almost all make really good pets.
Oh yeah, they definitely do, and like you said, you'll run into some that are nippy or spastic, but by and large, I mean, they're just really good-natured animals in my experience.
Okay.
Dave, where are you at?
I'm at my neighbor's house in the driveway.
Okay.
You right there. You got a boat.
Yeah.
What I lost all train of thought. What would you have going on in your head, bud? I'm lost.
Well, we were talking about Samboas and which ones?
Samboas. Yeah, that was it. That's what I forgot completely. The species. Yeah. No, that's fair. So okay, I'm gonna jump back onto morphs. So there's two lines. You got the paradox albino line, and then you have an albino line. I think I might have saw the albino line was from the Bells. Did it say, or Bell?
That's right. Yeah. So Mark Bell, he crossed the albino Egyptian into the Kenyans to get that A-male, in there. Now some people don't differentiate. Some people would collapse all those into the same thing, but anyway, that's kind of what happened there. And then the paradox albino is more of a, if you wanted to call it true Kenyan, it did come from East Africa, and so anyway, and again, that's the Barker line, really.
Interesting. And I'm sorry, do people put them together for double heads?
Yeah, so that's the one. So if you get a double visual there, expressing the albino and the paradox albino at the same time, that's what really kind of wipes out that. So it gives it you get a really bright colored animal with, and then the paradoxing is just going to be, really toned down, not black, more brown, right? And
that was the one I was talking about. That I thought was kind of hot.
That's different, a little bit different. That's a little bit different. Yeah.
So
and I can explain that too. Yeah, but the double visual of the albino, that's the JPB is the double visual in albino, and then the one you see there, that's a paradox albino G.X paint stripe.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, okay. How about this? Can you find albino Egyptians anywhere?
I doubt any. For people that are kind of purists or whatever, I don't know that you could find like a pure albino Egyptian anymore. I think they just got kind of bred in, right?
The Egyptian, is that a locale or is that a subspecies?
So it used to be, I hope I get this right. I think it was like Eryx colubrinus. And anyway, but since then it's been kind of lumped back together. So from the Egyptians, even the Rufessans, some of the more recent work shows that they're kind of like all the same. They're just phases of the same thing.
Okay, this one is the albino GX paint. This thing's insane.
Oh yeah. Some of those are really vivid orange. Yeah.
And that's just one line of paint.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say there?
Oh, and that's just a single line of albino, right? Or not both combined?
That's correct. That is just one. That's that Bell albino line on top of that and Genex paint.
That's tight.
Yeah, I see. I found some of the Erex Johnni now, some of the Indian Sambos, because I said I didn't see them before, but then I seen them. If we go, there you go. These are really cool, Dave.
Yeah, I haven't seen those. I feel like you see those every once in a while, but it's rare.
Yes, you don't see them hardly at all.
Yeah, I think I flipped one years ago, but I didn't really appreciate what it was. I think I got it from a breeder in New York. Yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
They're just kind of hit or miss at the shows and stuff, you know. So
yeah.
I don't think they have big litters, and I think those take like 4 or 5 years to breed too, don't they?
Are you talking about the Erex Johnni?
Yeah, the Erex Johnni.
So they have small number in their litter, but their babies are really large when they're born. Yeah.
And they take like, don't they take like 4 or 5 years to reach maturity?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like 4 to 5 years on the females. So that makes them a little bit different than the other Sambos as well.
And these are like the largest Sambo too, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, they're the largest species. And and the one you're showing there, that's one of the line bred Sunsets, you know, Sunset Johnni.
Who's responsible for selective line breeding to Sunset? Because I know Scott had these.
Not Rick Staub, you know, he was.
This sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. He's not the only one, but I think that's the one person that comes to mind as being one of the earlier people to do it.
And this is what we were talking about earlier, Dave. This is the Arabian Sambo. These are the
yeah.
I was looking at actually that exact video before we got started today.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Junior, I'm going to pop out for a second. I'll be right back. I got a weird message. You'll see me.
All right. Yeah, and here's another picture. This is Arabian Sambo close up.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can see those eyes right there on top of his head, you know?
Yeah, it's very interesting. They're such a unique species. So that's cool that, there's be like you're propagating them and everything, because it'd be neat to see like more of these, because sounds like if there's just a few people stop breeding them, like these things could possibly disappear because there's no chance you're going to import these again.
It's from what I understand, it's pretty tough. So and I wish I could do a better job with them, but it's just a slow project. It's real slow going, I don't know if I'll have any available anytime soon.
And you said that they're pretty expensive too. What's the price on the Arabian Sambos?
I don't guess there's really a market price. I did some of the ones I sold, say a few years back. I think I sold for like $1,000. So I don't know if that's what they would go for now or if it'd be more. I'm really not sure. Gotcha.
All right, and you're going to be at the Tinley Expo coming up in a few weeks, aren't you? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. I do all the Tinleys. That's one of my favorite shows, and I know you're there too. So
yeah,
I'll stop by and check out your stuff there. But it's a fun show.
And the Southeast Expo. So are you normally doing a lot of shows like in Tennessee? Is that where primarily you just do Tennessee shows or Tinley? What kind of shows are you doing?
Yeah, the NARBC stuff, especially Tinley, is kind of my staple. I will do a Tennessee show just every once in a while, but nothing, I guess predictably. But yeah, it's mostly Tinley. Used to do Arlington till they moved to Dallas, and this year I will do St. Louis after Tinley.
Oh, all right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell you, at Arlington, we spoke for a little bit. I think that was one of the first times we spoke, and I want to say it was last year. We probably spoke before that, but I don't remember every dude.
Right. Yeah, I remember you out there in Arlington. I think we were not right across from each other, but kind of catty-cornered across from each other, sort of.
We were practically across from each other. We were in the snake discovery aisle.
That's it. You got it. Yeah, we were divided by the line of the snake discovery fans. Yeah.
So I got to ask, to the left of me was a hognose breeder. To the left of that was Ryan McVeigh with VivTech. Both of them had amazing weekends. Now, I look at Sambo as being one of those, like, kind of pet animals for people, those smaller ones. Mm-hmm. Did you kill it that day on Saturday, or did you find that your sales were slow because of the crowd?
It did okay. It didn't really kill it, but I can't really say whether that crowd affected my sales in any way, positively or negatively. I don't know. I got to talk to a lot of people, so I hope that was good. It's a lot of fun. But it was probably mediocre sales. But if I remember right, I think that was the first time I was there, though. And sometimes, you gotta do a show a couple times before, you get more clientele, I guess you'd say, or more buildup of buyers.
What show was that?
Arlington?
Is Arlington, and there's a snake discovery aisle, and there was just a line of people, like, because I seen her in Sacramento, and there was like this massive line, but I wasn't near the snake discovery booth.
Yeah. You want me to tell the story? Or you want? I can make it really quick.
You got it. You do better than me.
Yeah, they set her up in an area, and I don't think they anticipated how many people would come to see her. And I mean, it was thousands of people, I think, just for her. And the line kind of went down the middle of the aisle, and it kind of it's kind of funny because it kind of snaked its way down the aisle. Like there was a small hognose table. It'd go over here, then it would get to a ball python table, and it'd swing away real quick and find something else it liked. And I felt like most of the day the line was actually moving away from my table because it was all breeder stock ball pythons and boa constrictors. But Hognose killed it, but she promotes Hognose big time. And VivTech almost sold out, and I think that's because the bioactive crowd that also follows her on Facebook, or online. So with you having the Samboas, I thought maybe you would actually get more sales because of that crowd.
Yeah. I did okay, but I don't know if you call it a point of reference or comparison there. I'm thinking I don't do a lot of shows really. So I'm thinking Tinley, and it wasn't, I didn't expect it to be that good, but it wasn't, it wasn't even half that good, but it was pretty good. I mean, I was happy with it,
I enjoy all the NARBCs. I haven't missed too many over the years, but it's really hard to compare all of them to Tinley because Tinley's Tinley.
Right.
And that brand, I mean, June, you remember they were once in Maryland, I think, NARBC, and they were in California too back in the day, right?
They had one for a short bit, and they did it twice in Virginia. Where the hell was that? Was it Fairfax? What the hell was it? And then they did a Philadelphia one. The Philadelphia one I liked, but they didn't continue that one. There was a really good show in Maryland, but it wasn't an NARBC show. It used to be considered one of the biggest reptile shows. I remember hearing stories of the one Maryland Expo, they called it Mars. And I don't know who it was, but it's people that knew Norm. And it was a bunch of Coolibrid guys, people that had Honduran milk morphs. And the one guy made $20,000. And that was back in 1999 or 2000. So that's equivalent to $80 million now. And shit. I mean, 20 grand. You could have bought probably a decent house. So, well, not that extreme. I'm getting a little too out of it. But anyway, that was a lot of money. But yeah, the NRB, well, Tinley was for us when I started out, wasn't the absolute best show, but it was a really good one. Now it's the herpetoculturist hotspot. I mean, I think it took a few years to get going, but that's any area. It's there's never going to be a show in the first time. It's a fucking slam dunk, except for maybe Bob's show is really good for a first time one because Bob already he knows everybody and he got a bunch of good breeders in one spot. But I mean, I guess all the NRBCs I wasn't at the very first Tinley. I was at the second one. I've been there every year since the second one in 2003. So I've been there every year because the first one was 2002. But yeah, Tinley, it makes sense that Rufus or John, I don't know. I know you go by. Which one do you prefer?
I go by Rufus. Yeah.
All right.
Either one.
Yeah. All right. Because that's such a hot spot for herpetoculturists. I feel you can take more obscure species to Tinley, right, and there will be a lot more people that appreciate them there, and you have a higher chance of selling them out. Those one they're a Coolibrid. I can't remember what their. I don't know. I don't even know their scientific name. I don't even think I could even know the genus, but is that they're called bird eating snakes, and they're almost calico looking.
Keep going. I think I know what you're talking about.
I could find Kev from he
was
posted
it the V-shaped aisle? You know what I'm talking about? Where Adeline and Chris would be. Was it down that way?
Yeah, probably. It's my friend Mutant Reptiles, Kev. He has them. They start out kind of plain. They're almost calico looking. Here it is. Neotropical bird eater.
Cool.
Well, somebody had some captive born ones the one year at Tinley. I know the good dude sold out. See, I think you go to a lot of shows and put them up there, and you'd sell like one or like, you know, because they're not cheap. I don't think they're not ultra expensive, but they're also not like they're not your friggin' corn snake or your, you know, normal hognose. So, but you know, you take stuff like that to Tinley, like I was kind of thinking about talking to Rufus about the Russian melanistic Sambos. I'm like, well, if I do buy them at Tinley, I'd have to make sure to buy them like fucking Friday, because I don't think by Sunday there's going to be any left. Because at Tinley, I can see that's the spot where the stuff kind of sells, especially if it's unique. Like I seen somebody there with captive born fish scale geckos, and they had only one left on Sunday morning. I was like, oh, those are really cool. So that's kind of a neat thing about Tinley is since it is such a large, massive show and it is such a herpetoculturist hotspot, you can find really niche stuff and the really common stuff, and you see all of your breeders and of course all the YouTubers and pet tubers. And speaking of pet tubers, does Emily keep Sambos? I know she is, like, you know, her favorite species is hoggos, but does she keep Kenyans? I feel like she would.
Yeah, I'm not real sure. You know, does she, Dave?
No, I don't know. I don't watch her. I'm a grown man.
Yeah, I don't know if she has Sambos or not. You know.
Okay.
I would think she probably would, because I mean the similarities to hogs and keeping them and that kind of thing, and them being a good pet species, you know. But I don't know for sure.
She has a shop, so I bet she sells them there. I'm going to her page now to see if, like, because I've only seen a few of her, like, parts of her YouTube videos.
Now years ago, she did do an interview with me at Tinley, you know, about the Sambos. And
okay.
So, but I think that was, you know, because there are things about education. She was trying to educate people about that species. But I'm not sure if they're interested enough that, you know, they just keep a bunch of them. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they keep them. I mean, there is this. They have a corn snake rescue that was eaten by. It looked worse in the first part of the video, but holy shit, look at how severe that is. I can't believe that thing's alive.
Holy crap!
Oh
so
man,
like
it is really bad.
Is that what that was?
They said it was eaten by a mouse, but usually only rats do that. Usually mice don't do that.
Man.
This is completely random, and then we'll never talk about corn snakes again. But I think it was the Maryland show, and I want to say it was the Reptilian Nation. This guy, like, you know, if somebody walks around and there's a bag in their hand, I know there's a snake in it, I'm fascinated. And this guy, like, I like to stare at the bag and guess the shape. This guy had this super thick snake, and there could have been a ball python for all I knew. So I guessed the species. It was like an anery corn snake, and I bet you it was thick enough around to eat medium rats. It was the biggest fucking corn snake I've ever seen.
That's cool.
What was that all about, Junior? Is there a certain place in the United States they get a little bit bigger? Because I'm not lying to you, man.
Yeah. It's called in people's rack systems being slammed with fucking food nonstop. That's medium where it occurs.
Yeah, medium rats. Twice a week.
It seems like the male corns seem to get bigger too. Like it's like a lot of well, not a lot, but there's certain culibrid species where the dimorphism, where the males get longer, like milk snakes, like Honduran milk snakes, and like Costa Rican black milks, and a lot of rat snakes. And you know, corns are a pantherophyte. So every time, even like wild corns, like this is you just said we're never going to talk about corn snakes again. Now we're talking about freaking corn snakes.
After this,
we were driving to go fishing. You already know where this story is going. Once I asked my cousin Raymond if he had ever found like corn snakes this time of the year. Is it December? And the temperatures were good. And he goes, no, we don't find corns. And he goes, I don't think I've ever found a corn snake in December ever. And he's lived down there for like 15 years. So you know what's going to happen. So we go fishing, and there's a big fucking corn snake crossing the road. I'm like, oh, and it was a male, and it was like 4 foot. Every time he found a giant corn snake in the wild, it always was like a male every time. And yeah, so I think these corns, like that anery, I bet it was like a male that was just like probably slammed to the tits with mice in a rack system, and that's where it's occurring.
Well, I also thought, you know, if they crossed that corn to a rat snake somewhere along the way, that actually could have made them bigger.
It could, but I don't think that's what it was if it's an anery. I don't think well, there is a lot of hybrids in corns. Like the Ultramel is supposed to have rat snake in it. I don't know. They say rat snake, they to figure like a Texas rat or something. But anyway, yeah, the whole corn snake things. You know, one of the biggest corns I ever seen, it looked like it wasn't an okatee, but it was kind of like similar to that. You know, it's a really high orange, nice, vivid, high contrast, normal corn. And it was like a 6-footer, and it was like ultra huge because it was fed a ton.
Yeah. You're gonna leave this me talking out the butt thing up there forever? Which, by the way, I only talked my butt one time. Robust reptiles one time. I'd do it again though. That's not beneath it.
Elise does have and we kind of covered this, Elise, but Rufus can probably reiterate it. But let's talk about the thoughts on the splash cannon sambo. It's supposed to be recessive, but it varies a lot in expression. And you said you could buy a breed like a high expression to like another high expression and get some low expressions, like it's variable, or could you clarify? I don't remember.
Yeah, you increase your chances of getting the high expression, but to me, I mean, you just the litters I've seen, I mean, you don't get like a ton of high expression litters usually, or a ton of individuals with that high expression. You just get one or two or something like that. Yeah.
So the high expression ones are pretty tough to come by. So they're in a lower percent.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think there's any line breeding aspect to that? Probably because everybody's going to be trying to breed those high expression ones. And if they're routinely getting that same percentage, that's reiterating that there isn't really much of a line breeding aspect there. It's more of a variable. I'm sure there is some line breeding that impacts it, but it's impacting it minimally.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because Elise is a hognose breeder and a friend of mine, and she's also in the Sambos, it appears.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So what's your goals in Samboas? Like for you right now, I mean, I'm sure it's not a big secret when you guys only have 7 genes. I'm sure everybody knows what the fuck's going on. So like, what are you striving to do? Like, you got anything this season you're looking forward to? Like, give me something.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's always that next step, right? Like there's the goal of the JPV paint, and then it's like, well, all right, next step, Gene X, I mean, I tried for that this year. Don't have it yet, but anyway, and then and even like with the Paradox Albino Gene X paint, just taking that further, of course, more pattern reduction, maybe pushing the colors in certain directions. One example maybe is like in some of those Paradox Albinos, especially that one that you guys saw at the show, that Paradox Albino Gene X paint, it has that greenish color in there. And that's something I've always kind of wanted to do something with, but maybe some direction I could go there is can you line breed for that? Or is there something else going on there that causes that greenish color, so.
That's unique because, we discussed that a little bit at the show, and that's actually something that like Junior's really good for is, looking for small expressions in a species to start line breeding or see what it turns into. So, they don't get a lot of new mutations. And so I made the comment that those small details could actually take them in a direction they don't realize it.
Yeah, and we're all looking for stuff like that, I'm sure. I mean, I know other breeders pay attention to those things. I definitely do. When you see something with, it's got like the wrong color eyes, or, you're like, oh, this certain morph has black eyes, but this particular animal's got blue eyes or white eyes or something, there's things like that we watch for and try to see if there's something to it, I guess.
I get that. So we talked about it in some of the snow projects, and I want to say it's only in the Paradox snows. Sometimes they get those like bluish or grayish eyes. And I kind of made a comment that maybe that was some paradoxing in the eye in the snows. Is there any what are your thoughts on it?
I don't, I've not done enough with it to know. That's one of those. So that Paradox snow, they're going to have typically the darker eye. However, I've seen some out there that have that silver or bluish color eye. And I have a few that are like that. I've bred them to other things. I've not seen anything yet, but it doesn't mean that, there's nothing there. There's a good example there he's showing with the darker eye there, I think. But
yeah, those eyes are pretty dark. It looks pretty good. I like these snow splashes.
Yeah,
that's like snow paint, actually. Snow paint.
Okay. Yeah.
So again, now that one's got those dark eyes. I've had some that I've come across over the years. Is it more common to see with the dark eye than the pink eye?
Well, so the dark eyes, that's from that anery. So if you're looking at like a snow or the Paradox snow, then of course that's a combo of some type of albinism plus the anery. The anery has that dark eye, and that's kind of what goes through to that, But so it is very unusual if you see one with the blue eyes, you know.
Okay, so in albinism, though, I mean, the anery shouldn't win in the eye, and there's a lot of snows I've made in a lot of different species that will have that pink eye. In the albinos, you get that grayish blue eye at all in the albino paradoxes?
In the let's see. So in the albino, well, no, in a paradox albino, you get you do get that lighter colored eye, not the dark eye.
Yeah,
Is that
and you
what you're
never,
asking there?
yeah, like, do you ever get that dark eye with the albinos, or never see that?
With just the albinos, it's usually like the lighter reddish colored eye.
Here's
And
one.
that's the same for those snows too. The snow, not the paradox snow, but the snow. I mean, it gets a little confusing, but anyway, the paradox snow paint, like you're showing there, those will have the dark eyes.
The lighting is darker in this video too, so it's making it look darker than it is. So that one's tough.
Yeah.
All right. But you guys understand, I'm sure Junior follows, like when you make snows, you typically will not get an eye that looks like that. Like they're always that light pink eye. And I don't know, other than like a T positive albino, where I've ever seen a darker pupil.
Yeah, you got a point there. I think
that's that paradox albino, though. You know, I think that's along the lines of what you're talking about. You're saying with that T positive and T positive in the anery, and in your snow would get that dark eye. Is that what you're saying?
Well, genetically, you get a pink eye in albinos. And genetically, when you add aneurystic and other species, it still keeps the same eye pigment. The aneurystic never wins that battle because it's taken all that away.
Yeah,
so,
and I think you're right. So, like with the Kenyans, the albino, not the paradox albino, but the albino, when it's combined with the anery, you will get that snow with the red eye.
This is one here. It's pretty red, Dave. It's like it just looks like it's so deep the pigment, and it also has probably something to do with light refraction. But this eye is pretty red. And I think it's kind of looking at like an albino mouse almost. It almost reminds me of their eyes. Like, you know, sometimes their eyes are like, you know, they're like red. They're not like bright, screaming like, you know.
No, but that was the bell line, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the bell line. That's the one that would keep the red eye.
Yeah, the bell line, that's the original albino Kenyan Sambo line. That's supposed to be Egyptian.
Right. You got it.
Subspecies or locale. I don't know. I don't want to get back into that one because I don't know exactly. I remember hearing that once you were talking about that. I remember hearing about that years ago. But then I was like, what the fuck is an Egyptian Sambo? I've never heard or anybody say, here's an Egyptian Sambo. They have the albino, but they can't come up with a normal.
Now, there were some normal Egyptians imported recently.
There were?
There were, yes.
All right, what do they look like compared to a mainstream like Kenyan Sambo?
Yeah, they look like a Kenyan. The ones that I saw didn't have that orange color. They're more like a maybe off. Let's see, tan and gray or tan and black kind of color. Okay,
I wonder if that's because I remember there's one person, and I've seen it before, that it had litters of Kenyan Sambos, and they'd be like more like a yellow and black, and then orange and black.
Yeah, you can get both.
Okay, so the Egyptians, they look more like those kind of yellow and black like Kenyan Sambos.
Well, so that's the ones that I saw, you know, that were recently imported. I think most of those look like that. They didn't have any of that high orange coloration. However, that being said, you know, you go as far south as Tanzania, and I've seen some with that. I mean, it's not uncommon to see some that have that lighter color. They still look different than the Egyptians, but the color, you know, it's you can see that light color, you know, just about anywhere from I guess from Egypt all the way down, you know.
All right.
What rack systems do you keep in these animals in?
Oh, okay. I use a variety, just depending on the sizes, what species we're working with. But oh yeah, nice. Yep, there's your Egyptian there.
Egyptian.
Yeah.
Did Outback bring those in like a year or two ago? Is that like that rare one that they have every once in a while?
The group that came in, I don't think it was Outback. I think it was is it Mike Matson, I believe.
Did you see Outback does have something in that category? I don't exactly remember what it was, but I want to say it was like last year they got some in. I think their price point might have been like $500-600 if that helps out a lot. But they were a normal phase, but it was supposed to be like
Saharans.
maybe they were the Saharans. Maybe it
I
wasn't.
know they're still, so it is still common to see like imported Saharans. There's a lot of those in the sand boas. Yeah.
There's an Arabian sand boa eating. That's hilarious.
There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, we were discussing getting new mutations into Kenyans.
Yeah.
And you just said it was the Saharas are the ones that came in last year through Outback, possibly.
I would say that's likely what it was, but I'm not sure. I know the Saharans are, out of all the sand boas, Saharans are still being imported.
Well, I guess the reason I bring that up is, if a new mutation was discovered in that, do you think you would get your purists and then you would get maybe the Kenyan guys would mix it in, or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, now in terms of, I mean, as far as I know, I don't think you can cross the Saharans and the Kenyans. Now, some of these hybrid expert breeders, they might be able to do it, but it's not been done as far as I know.
And not to encourage it, but if you were pulling mutations out of it, I don't know if that would benefit the Kenyan community or not.
No, I see what you're saying. In order to get in a new morph, you're saying, hey, I cross that in. Kind of like I guess same concept of putting that albino Egyptian into a Kenyan or something, but. I just don't know if it would work because of their reproductive differences there, one laying eggs and one being the live bearer, that kind of thing.
I forgot about that part again. You should have stopped me 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, the Saharans, I don't think they do look very similar. And the Saharans have their face are a little different and they have this weird ball at the tip of their tail. And yet I don't think you could hybridize those. I'd be like utterly shocked if you could.
Well, yeah, I mean, people ask me all the time. They're like, "Hey, can you cross the Russians and the Kenyans?" And again, I don't know. I don't want to say no, but again, you have those reproductive differences where, they're both live bearers, but they have different gestation times, even. So,
sure. Okay. So I wonder if the Egyptians though, if they keep bringing them in, there's your chance of getting a new morph, because
that may be.
Is like right next to Kenya. So, and I'm looking at these pictures of these Egyptians. I see some orange and black ones.
Mm-hmm.
They look like a Kenyan to me. I'd say hybrid. Put them together. Breed them.
Well, and so, you bring up a good point, which is, I think that's the difference between what do you call it, lumpers and splitters or purists and whatever. So, yeah, sometimes we differentiate in locales, but the taxonomic work that's been done most recently shows that, Egyptians and Kenyans are the same thing.
All right. So, there's just a locale difference. So they're okay to hybridize. Yeah. And if you think they're not okay to be hybridized, you're pretentious and probably don't have many friends. There's another Egyptian. It looks like a really pretty Kenyan Sambo. And that's an interesting guy because I didn't know all this.
Wow. That's was that an Egyptian?
This says Egyptian. It says Phoenix Zoo, Arizona Trail, iNaturalist. This is obviously in somebody's enclosure on Aspen. So it's the zoo, but there's also you really got to go on iNaturalist and see if there's anybody. I'd go on iNaturalist. I'd see some interesting things. Somebody that had locale leopard geckos they found. Another interesting one was I was looking up Texas horned lizards, and I seen populations in South Carolina.
Yeah, the Myrtle Beach population.
Yeah, people let them go there. It makes sense. I'm like, well, they got that habitat's okay enough, temperature's okay enough, and they got ants. There's ants everywhere where there's sand and it's coastal. There's fucking fire ants everywhere. They should let those Texas horned lizards go everywhere. There's an invasive that could actually do some good. Let them go all in Florida. You got enough goddamn fire ants.
I don't think you're allowed to say that. You might want to edit that out.
It's just a suggestion. I'm not saying to actually do it. It's never a good idea to put in invasives. That was a joke. Hopefully nobody takes me seriously as I'm saying that.
Disclaimer.
All right, disclaimer there. It should have been noted I was joking when I added a bunch of swear words.
So, one thing too that we talked about, which I found pretty intriguing about the species, is it doesn't cost a lot of money to get some of the better animals you have.
No, not relative to your other species. You're right. It's not a lot to get in,
No, and I'm going to not change the subject, but what are you doing that, man? I'm trying to talk opinions right now. What are you showing that Hognose shit for?
It just came up, so I thought it'd be interesting to show.
Yeah, good way to segue in when I'm like, let's talk about how good Sambos are. And you're like, but, Hognose are better.
It just happened to be there, Hognose versus Sambos. Yeah. That's actually a really good compliment. Hognose are ultra popular.
Yeah,
they're not doing hognose versus like corn snakes, hognose versus black rat snakes, or hognose versus. They're doing versus samboas. Two different people.
the hognose is the king of colubrids at the moment. I don't think there's anything bigger than hognose.
Okay.
Probably not. Yeah.
No. Okay, we don't have to argue that. Okay, so back to them. So, like I said, it's fairly inexpensive to buy into some of the better projects. I thought years ago I saw some stuff maybe with Holloway that was in the 2,000 or 3,000 range. Am I wrong on that?
So. No, I think you're right. You know, some of the, if you want to go more expensive on the Sambos back then, I mean, some of that paint stuff, if I remember right, I think like the snow paints were around 3,500 at the beginning. You know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna at least ask. You consider Kenyan Sambos the hybrids, the ones that have Rufusins in them? You know how they make the Rufusins crosses? Because actually, where are the Rufusins from?
Yeah, Ethiopia was the first imports. I believe they're in that area of Ethiopia, Somalia, but they also have, you know, even some of the taxonomic work there just shows it's likely just a phase of Kenyan. Although to me, I mean, they look very different. You know, I'm not done any like scale counts or looking at any morphometrics there, but I mean they do look different, and they're smaller, and so anyway, I don't know.
Okay, so it does
but
sound
obviously you can breed them, like you guys are talking about. You can breed them to the Kenyans. So that's what was done to get the stripes, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that. So there's 2 hybridized morphs in that community.
One, the Rufusins. We don't consider the Egyptians. That's not a hybrid.
Not going to cut. No, all right. I didn't know if we did. The way he was talking about it initially, he looked very uncomfortable about it.
It's a purist thing, and it's like kind of like the Rosie. The Rosie boa people are the most. I mean, it's been a long time, but I was on kingsnake.com, the forums for Rosie boas, and at the time I was like, man, I kind of like some of these Anery Rosie boas. I like some of these locales. I was like, it's so interesting that there's so many locales, and then there's even ones like side of like 422 highway locale. I'm like, that's ultra specific. Then the more I'm watching these guys, some guy pops up all proud and happy with this albino. I think, man, what was it? Was it whitewater? Albino whitewater, Rosie boa. And people started calling it a friggin' hybrid. And it was, I can't remember exactly, but it was a subspecies cross. I'm like, these guys, they integrate, this subspecies integrates with the other one. How are they calling this a hybrid? And they're like, well, it's a hybrid because it doesn't a naturally occurring subspecies. He took one of that subspecies and did it himself. I'm like, all right, that's it. I don't want Rosie boas anymore. They were ultra critical, everybody in the whole entire community. And then I was like, that's it. And then I kind of moved on. I still like Rosie boas though. They're still really cool.
They're cool. Yeah, so I mean, you got similar stuff. It's not that extreme in the Sambo community, but there are people that they look at like a Rufescens crossed into a Kenyan as a hybrid. And I don't know if that's the correct way to look at it or not. I think it's important to note, did you cross Rufescens into Kenyans and kind of keep up with it, that kind of thing. Record keeping's good, but some people do not want Rufescens blood in their stuff at all because they believe that that's a hybrid. Although from what I understand, in nature that population is sort of continuous.
Okay. So they're not super anal about it, but some people are kind of anal about it.
Yeah. You just got your, I guess people kind of either way, but no, it doesn't sound as extreme as with what he was talking about with the Rosie Snow.
And the Rufesins, are they all naturally striped?
No, they're more, so like most of the pure ones that were originally imported, they were solid.
Kind of like this?
That's it. You got it. Yeah. Yeah, they're solid. And then when they breed them to the Kenyans, then they would come out with the offspring would have these stripes, right? And so then, yeah, there you go. Yeah, and so that's what you get with when you do your cross there. And that, of course, is used to slide into some of these other morphs like the Paradox albino to give you the striped Paradox albino, which is a pretty cool looking animal.
They're really cool. And then here's the one thing too. It's like some of this stuff. Like, let's go to say the Egyptians versus the Kenyan Sambos. They look the same. You said they did, I don't know who or what, if they did DNA testing and are relatively exactly the same. They're just locality differences.
Yeah.
you do need to strengthen some of these bloodlines. So I think it's really good. And sometimes these ones that are like, let's say a subspecies crossing, you're diversifying bloodlines and strengthening them. So I think it's really good. That's interesting. You said that about the Rufusins, though, because you said you noticed that these are smaller than the Kenyan Sambos.
Yeah, they seem to be. Yeah, and they are, even the stuff that I have that are striped, so that they're mixed up Rufusins. They're the females, they some of them ovulate earlier and they're smaller and they just don't get as big. So I think they do seem different.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, and at this point too, them pulling the stripe combo out, them pulling the albino out. I mean, when it comes to the amount of that blood that's still left in, I mean, these things are probably like 98% Kenyan at this point, because it's not like you guys reintroduce it after that.
No, you're right. I mean, there's probably very little. Now, there are some people though that kind of specialize in that, in the Rufusins. They keep up with what they've got. There are a few people that have some of the pure stuff, and they're highly sought after, to have that solid looking pure animal. And then on the side, some of them, there are some pure ones that aren't solid, but still, for the most part, they are. But you do have people that, still have either high percentage or have pure ones.
Yeah, it would be cool if somebody came out of the woodwork with albino Egyptians. I find it sad when things like that are lost in time.
You mean Rufusins?
Oh, the Rufusins? I thought we said the Egyptians earlier. Am I getting that mixed up?
The albino started from Egyptians.
Right, yeah, that's what I mean.
So you're saying, does somebody still have that pure line that was bred in?
Yeah.
I don't know. Mark Bell might know that. So.
Okay.
No way, Dave. They're gone.
Probably are. There you go.
That was so long ago. I mean, Kenyan Sambos can live a long time. Tracy Barker had that one. I think it was like 29 years old. How long can he live? Like 30, 35?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they can live a long time.
Okay. Right. How fast do they get up to sexual maturity?
So the females, usually about 3 to 4 years. Most of mine average out around 3 years. And then the males, though, I mean, they can go at 18 months and, 50 grams even.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what's your community size like, man? Like, is there there's 3 or 4 big names and then it's really scattered after that? Or, how you guys looking?
That's a good question. I don't know if I put a number on it really in terms of, I guess there's well-known, there's definitely well-known breeders in the Sambo community. In terms of how many, is there 10 or 20 or 3? I don't know,
Well, I guess, referring to your customer base then, is it a lot of swapping within the community, or do you find a lot of new money comes into the species?
Yeah, I think it's mostly within the community. You do get some people, again, hognose breeders, as of late, some ball python breeders, coming in, but historically, I think it's just been like a small group and people trading and buying, from each other. And I know it was that way, 25 years ago. I'm looking for Dodomas, for example, and I would find one at a show and be like, oh man, I found one. And it ends up, I produced it and sold it to somebody else. And now they're selling it back to me or something, so.
Interesting. So it is, okay, how about this? Last question about the market. Out of 10 people buy in, how many people buy to breed?
I don't know. I don't know with the Kenyans, there's a lot of pet people out there just want them as pets. They don't look to breed. But I don't know what the percent, I couldn't put a percentage on that. I could speak maybe more to the Russians. I do know that. Most people that buy Russians from me don't breed them. I'd say 1 out of 10 might breed.
Okay, interesting. Junior, what do you think it is in hognose? Do you think you're more pet industry, or do you think it's a lot more breeders?
Well, yeah, that's a good one, because I want to say I'm close to Rufuses. It depends what you're selling though. Let's say if I put up all breeder quality snakes or like morph combos are a little higher end. Then of course I'm going to be netting more of those people. And there's more people coming into hognose to breed right now, especially in the last like 5 years. But let's say I take a bunch of $150 and $200 hognose to a show, and to a show like the Atlanta Expo, I had a decent amount of pet, purchasers or people looking for pets. The one thing is, like, sometimes, like, it's not that I avoid selling to pet keepers. The issue for the most part, I think most of them are going to relatively good homes, but I don't want, like, when you're just trying to sell a bunch at, like, let's say $80 and $100 each, and everybody's buying them up, it's like, can you really keep track if these people are set up and they're really, in it to take care of this animal? And so that's why, like, selling the stuff a little higher priced, $200 and up, you're not running into that as much, because once people start to have to spend a few $100s, they're a little more cautious, and they're a little more conscious of the commitment they're making, and it's not just like some smaller commitment. But I don't know. I'd say I don't know. There's actually, especially when I'm selling stuff at these shows, I'd say it's like 50-50 right now.
Okay. I'm going to take this a different direction.
Maybe a little less.
Maybe a little bit less.
Maybe a little more pet people. More pet people.
So your early influence was Tom. Do you have some early advice he threw at you back in the 90s, early 2000s that, really stood out to you?
Yeah. There was things where we shared some projects together that, he taught me the importance of buying enough animals, I guess, when you start a project. Like, my thing then, of course, was like, okay, yeah, I need a male and a female. We're good, And so he and I did a project once with this. I mean, kind of this will date us here, but it was back when the pieballs were sort of a relatively new thing, and we're getting into pies, and he's piebald ball pythons, and I said, he asked me if I wanted to do this project with him, and I said, okay, all right, well, how much would it cost if we bought a male and a female? And he's like, oh no, we need like a visual male, and then 2 het females and a backup het male, and so stuff like that now, I implement those strategies now all the time. But I had no clue then that we needed to do that, in case one male was bad or one female became egg bound or whatever.
Yeah, I've gotten better with that with colubrids, where I didn't used to hold back extra males, and now sometimes I'll hold back 2 extra males in colubrid projects.
Yeah, I think it's important. And it depends on the species too. Some species that are a little bit more kind of touch and go, I guess, or not as maybe durable as sandboas, then you've got to really pay attention to that, I think.
Okay. And in the early days, you guys working together, we're talking melamine rack systems. Or were you guys just stacking tubs on like wire racks? Like, how were things back then?
Oh man, yeah. So some of my earlier racks were actually he had built them out of melamine. I mean, those things are heavy, as you guys probably know, and he would upgrade to new stuff, and he would sell me the old stuff. And so yeah, I had ball python and sandboa racks all built out of melamine.
Okay.
Those are really good. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was gonna say it was really good questions, because that's actually really good. Because that's you said earlier that Tom was a big mentor, and Dave's asking some good questions, like because it sounds like you were actually on the hell I'm trying to say. I don't know. You're talking to Tom pretty often. Like how that? Because I know you said you gave your last of your anneries, like hognose, to Tom, and then he continued breeding those and everything. Sure. And how'd that go? You're pretty much so close on like terms with Tom? You're like, hey, just take these over and stuff. And
yeah, so I guess I can give you a little background there. About me and Tom. I mean, so like I had said, I grew up in Manchester, Tennessee, and he had a veterinary clinic there for a long time until he retired, moved down to Montgomery, Alabama. And so anyway, so I would drop it. We had this sort of shared interest. I guess it started. I met him doing a what would they call it? Like some sort of program in school. It's not coming to me right now, but it's like a program in high school where you go shadow that. It's a job shadowing. Anyway, so it shadowed him at his vet clinic, and then anyway, we got to talk about snakes, that kind of thing, and then we ended up going to shows together. I worked in his collection for a while, probably maybe guess like 3-4 years while I was in college. I take care of some of his collection, and so anyway, we did several projects together, and we started like Tinley. I can't remember. You said it was 2002. I don't think we were there then, but we were there probably around 2006 or so, and so we used to do all the Tinleys together, and some other shows, and so anyway, we were friends for a long time, But then the part about the hognose, I guess you asked about the hognose. He was already breeding hognose, and so I was having trouble with that axanthic line. And the trouble that I was having is I had about a 50% hatch rate. The things that hatch didn't want to live, or they die right out of the egg. And I thought I was doing something wrong. I was like, Tom, I'm just not. I guess I'm not a colubrid breeder. I just can't hatch eggs. I must need to stick with sand boas. So anyway, I gave them to him, and he still had the same problem. And so we just suspect it was some sort of genetic issue now. And that line though is still in that collection that's been passed on to his son. Herping Harbins.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So. There's one thing I always talk about, especially with like new breeders coming in the hobby. Everybody stumbles across a breeder and we cling on to them. And sometimes the advice we get is good, sometimes it's bad. But especially in certain regions, you saying you were lucky enough to have somebody that close to you, somebody who was very educated. If you had the wrong neighbor or the wrong person giving you advice, you might not even be in the hobby right now. So, we're not all so lucky meeting the right person along the way. And like I said, this is very addicting, and it's very contagious to love this when you're around somebody else that loves it,
Yeah, you got that right. I mean, I'm super fortunate to have known him. And when I started there, and you guys know this too, I mean, there just weren't many resources 25 years ago on how to keep a lot of these species. And, you had a book here or there if you were lucky,
Yeah, no, that's cool. Like I said, having that connection, and it's bad timing to be bringing this up. I talked to his son, and Tom was always really great to me. He bought display cases a long time ago from me. Just always, like I said, I don't think I've ever heard a bad story about Tom.
No, definitely not. And you mentioned those display cases. He told me about them, and then I bought some from you back then too. So I still have some of those.
I appreciate that, and you took care of them real nice, man. They looked really good when I saw them last time.
Yeah, thanks.
But Junior,
yes.
What do you want to talk about, buddy? Anything you want?
Oh, geez. Well, I don't know. We covered a lot of good stuff, and this was I like this current topic we're on as far as mentors, and like Rufus was saying, like 20, 25 years ago, there really wasn't much information. I got sold a lot of hognose snakes, and they sometimes weren't good.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard finding those particular people that had, a lot of knowledge and experience, and they were also willing to share it and everything and help, help you along.
Yeah. No. And Junior, you're a second generation breeder. So, in a sense, your father was your mentor, at least brought you in, at least to the shows and all that, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. My dad is definitely a mentor. So my mom was as well, too. I'd say here's one thing. When it comes to breeding or keeping even reptiles, it's starting from a very young age. It's very important to have family that's okay with it. Because I'd say that's a huge limitation to a lot of people I meet. They're like, yeah, my parents won't let me keep stuff. And, that's one thing I say all the time. Is I don't even want kids. But if I had a kid, I'd let them pursue something like that. I mean, easy for me to say because I'm interested in this stuff, but I'll take it a step further. If my kid wanted to keep tarantulas, I'd let him keep all kinds of tarantulas. And if you don't know this, I don't like tarantulas. I'm terrified of them. I hate them. But if they were really into it, I'd be like, yeah, you can get tarantulas. And there's so many people that are like, oh, I'm not allowed to have this animal because of my mom. It's like, why'd your mom even have kids? It's like, why? She wants to project all of her ideologies on you? I don't like snakes, so you can't do this. I don't like this music. Can't listen to this. It's like, come on. So, but yeah, my dad was definitely a huge, part of it and inspiration. He actually kept, tortoises and a lot of frogs and some gecko species when I was a little kid. He never had snakes until later. And that's probably one reason I ended up liking snakes, because I was exposed to all these interesting, animals, reptiles and amphibians. And the one thing he didn't keep was snakes. So when I finally did see a snake, I was like, oh, wow, this is really, really cool. And I just really gravitated towards them. So yeah, I mean, and then after that though, I mean, my dad was definitely a big motivator for pushing me to keep doing stuff. And if I had stuff to do and I wasn't like motivated, he would yell at me to do it. So that was awesome. Well, it's kind of like an alarm clock, or buzzer telling you, hey, you have to do this. And then we bred geckos together for a long time, and I learned a lot from breeding geckos with him that I applied to snake keeping. So I took a lot from that, especially with genetics, quarantine, diseases. Learned a lot of stuff like that. And also bringing that up, Rufus, is there any diseases to worry about in like Sambos? Is there any diseases?
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, the cool thing is there's nothing really like notoriously problematic with this species in terms of disease. The only one that I can think of that can pop up every now and then are just some RTIs. You'll see that, but yeah, there's not a lot that I see in terms of disease, and especially true with the Russian sandbows. Those things are probably, I mean, they're tough as nails, and I've never had any of them have any issues.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of diseases are species specific. So if they came from the wild and you reproduced them and they were clean from that point on, you're probably mostly safe, unless something could always hop over, like something like nidovirus. But I don't think I've ever heard of a Sambo with nidovirus or inclusion body disease.
Not that I know of. And so, but I don't have, it may be different for other people if they're keeping multiple species. I don't have a lot of things, going on in my collection. I don't have a lot of things coming in and out, though. I will say that.
That is good. That is good.
Yeah, I think that's one disservice to new people coming in the hobby when they don't know about viruses, bacteria, anything that can affect the species. And it seems like a lot of breeders don't want to discuss it because if you know too much, it's suspicious. So
it can put people off for sure.
It really does. Because I try to talk about that stuff at the shows with people, and like you could tell, you get that look. But no, I think, like I said, it's a disservice not to let people know. And I was actually curious about that going into this conversation.
Okay. Yeah, they're not very problematic when it comes to disease. What about the hogs, though? Are they? I'm interested.
Crypto's Beridium.
Crypto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, big one. Crypto about 7 years ago. It was like everywhere, and like a lot of people were talking about it, and now like it's getting back to like where it's like kind of, I think, a little dangerous because nobody seems to be popping up with it. Nobody really has it, and we know this is a very contagious, very secretive disease, and it'll let people's guard down a bit. And when a guard gets down, they might quarantine a little less. Some of these people do like period, like a period of quarantine, and once the snake is okay, they put it in their collection, and that can be very dangerous because they could be keeping it in remission. It might not be shedding off any oocysts, so it can't be detected. So it's a very scary one, and that's the biggest one to look out for.
Did that species jump, or was that something that just started in Hognose all of a sudden?
That one's up to like debate. I would say it's a species jump though, just because like 15, 20 years ago, everybody used to trade Hognose back and forth, including me. Like they were playing cards. Like I'd get Hognose right away because I went, oh, this one's cool, I'll get this one. And I never got anything with cryptosis. And some of these were from people that were even flipping, and they were buying Hognose from other breeders. And, some of these people that are flipping and these other breeders that are just kind of like buying and reselling, they were, keeping other species of colubrids as well. Milk snakes, king snakes, corn snakes, and Cryptos Beridium is somewhat, I wouldn't say common, but it is within corn snake collections. It can be. So I'm thinking to jump from corn snakes. I've never seen a wild or heard of a wild hognose with it. I have seen some pretty sickly looking hognose coming out of I've seen some like out of like West Texas and like Midland, Texas. I've seen some ones that are caught that were like kind of had that emaciated look. And that could just be because they have something like roundworm, or their immune system is just really run down. Let's say like they're just having a hard time finding water and food. And so they're just looking bad because of that. And that them just being unable to find food and water regularly has now compounded and they're even worse. But I did get a wild caught one like that once, and it was having like diarrhea. So that's possible that some of those could be from the wild with cryptosis. But if I had to bet money on it, I'd say it'd probably jump from a corn snake or a milk snake into a hognose because of how abrupt it was. All of a sudden, like, you didn't have to worry about cryptosis, and all of a sudden, like 8 years ago, it was like popping up everywhere. And there was a few particular people that had a lot of it, and then they were reselling, and it went around to like I'd say about 80% of hognose keepers and breeders.
Oh, man.
So that's in corn snakes too, right?
It is. I don't want to say names, but there was this one big corn snake breeder, and they definitely had cryptosis, and they were selling a lot. I remember my dad got some corn snakes from them, but they were babies, and my dad's were fine. And actually, I bought some corn. This was a long time ago. I was like 17, and I had them in my quarantine, and these things started regurging, and their stomachs swelled up. And I showed them to my dad, and my dad's like, "Get those things the F out of here!" And I'm like, dude, I was like, these things look fine when I bought them 2 weeks ago at Daytona. And my dad got them. My dad was all like sweating bullets pretty much over because he bought some from that guy also, but his turned out to be okay. So my dad got lucky on that. And yeah, my dad never experienced it, which is lucky because, he didn't have he bred corns for like 12, 13 years, but 12 or 13 years is a relatively short time. If you do get hit with something with cryptosis and it gets in your whole collection, that could take you 3, 4, 5 years just to recover from all that, hatching new babies and restarting up. Maybe even it's really detrimental. So just having say something like a mentor that teaches you about quarantine and stuff like that. And that's the one cool thing now, available nowadays, people talk about quarantining. Whether you want to take that advice or not, it's up to you. It's very good advice. And yeah, that's the thing. It's very, if somebody's told you to quarantine and you did, and your collection is really good, most likely that person helped you save about 4 or 5 years, a bunch of stress, having probably mental trauma, all kinds of other shit. Knowing to quarantine and listening to it and actually utilizing that information, in my opinion, it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what you do with it. It might not accumulate, culminate to that amount. But if you turn into a really big breeder and you do this for a long period of time, if you do get that information early on, I'd say that information is invaluable.
That was deep. Yeah, no, and like you said, that 5 years, I always tell people, that first 5 years in the hobby usually makes or breaks people. It takes a little bit to get the animals up to size. Then you have to figure out whether or not you're able to be a salesman. And then, you throw the wild card in there, you get one sick animal in that first 5 years. Don't understand why that animal's drooling. Don't think anything of it. Next thing you know, it's 2 or 3 animals, and you're out of the hobby before you even got started.
Yeah, so that's a good thing with the Kenyan sambos. It's pretty cool to have a species that is a little bulletproof. I have beaded lizards, and they're there's nothing to worry about in them, and that is a nice thing because I'm finally a species where I don't have to worry about shit. Because the hognose snakes is definitely I hate getting I'd love to buy new hognose snakes. It's my favorite thing on the face of the planet. That means there's something cool and new that's worthy enough of I want that in my collection, and and it's fun to get a new project, and that keeps the the excitement with these projects.
How long do you wait when you bring a new one in? How long do you have to keep them in quarantine?
You'll like this one. I indefinitely quarantine. I take the hatched babies. I put their eggs in a new box. I bury them. When the babies emerge, they go into my main collection. I never take anything, even if they can test negative 8 times. I don't care. I've seen enough with crypto. I've been tricked by cryptosis 3 times, and these other people. And sometimes they'll be like this. They'll be doing similar things that I used to do. And they're well, I was oh yeah, okay, do that. I was it's not gonna. I was I'll tell you right now. I was don't trust it. I don't trust the test. If you get the really the more expensive lab work and you do it routinely, I'd say it's 99.9%. The swabs, those ones where you send in the mail, those are highly inaccurate. Actually, at Reptile Talks, I asked Dr. Scott Stahl about it. I'm why do these DNA tests for cryptosis beridium suck so much? What the hell's the deal? Why do they come back with so many false negatives? And he's basically well, they're cheap. They're just not as good. I'm oh, that's all it is? He goes, yeah, pretty much. That's how he summed it up. And he's the ones that are $175, $200. He goes, where they're sent out to labs and you get a solid stool sample. He goes, those are very accurate. He goes, those are very accurate. If the oocysts are present, just do a few tests and then you're good. But, say if you have to test 100 animals and it's $200 per test, I mean, I guess you could make like a poop soup, if you will, you know, mix it all together. But, you know, I don't know. I feel it's tough, man. So if you have a few to test, easier. And if you have a smaller collection, like it's a little easier. And then it's almost easier to do perma quarantine, because if you have a small collection, you're like, all right, I have these perma quarantine, and I'll take these new babies and set them over here. Because the good news is with like Cryptosporidium, it's not airborne, unlike like nidovirus. I heard nidoviruses, like I didn't know that. You know, that's the one thing. I'm not an expert on nido. I'd say I'm an expert as far as experience and everything goes with Cryptosporidium. But when it comes to like nido, I don't know. I don't have any hands-on experience with it. But I heard nido, like it can be within a few, like if they're like 5 feet away, they could possibly get it. I didn't think there's like their expulsion of air, it's got to be a really small radius. I think these people are out dumping stuff out, or they're not being that careful, and they don't want to face facts, and they're like, oh, this one got infected 5 feet away, and they're like, oh, it must be airborne.
So, by the way, very depressing conversation too. So here's the thing, like I've always heard of airborne this, airborne that. IBD, I think there were certain people in the community that said IBD was airborne. I think the problem I have with that idea is reptile shows. There's no way that this stuff wouldn't spread like wildfire at a reptile show if it was something airborne, considering all the different people are in the same building at the same time. So I'm not going to deny that it's not true, but again, close quarters, and I've done a lot of shows, and maybe I'm lucky, but I've never come home with anything other than, God forbid, a mite.
Yeah. I think nido, though, like again, like reptiles, like, you know, they're respirating a lot less than a mammalian species. Their zone to expel air has got to be very small.
Yeah. So random, that's got to be a positive for Kenyans. You guys don't run into many mite issues, do you?
No, we really don't relative to other species. I believe they can get mites, but I've never had mites in my collection. And I've heard other people too talk about how, I mean, I've actually had people in the Sambo community be like, hey, they don't get mites, you know?
Yeah.
But they can, but yeah, it's not common though.
Not really scales to get underneath. I mean, I could see it maybe around an eye socket, but
yeah, they have those tight fitting scales, you know, and so yeah, I've not seen much of it, and I've never had mites in the Sambos either, so in my collection. So
where do all the mites come from, Dave? Retic people? I feel like it comes from retic people and boa people. Who's to blame? Who the fuck keeps it? Why is there still mites even in the community? They should be like gone.
Well, not only are there still mites, but they're getting stronger. Like I hear some of the sprays don't work.
You told me about that.
Oh, they're resistant?
Yeah.
Here's the thing: the permethrin, I believe, comes out of China. So I hear in some cases. I hear that the strength has just been diluted down a little bit to where some of this stuff we used for years doesn't work like it used to.
You're blaming China for the mite epidemic in reptiles? That's a fucking leap.
I don't know. I thought that was fuck you. No. Well, how about this, Junior? Do I remember right? Are there mites in California?
There is. You know what? Somebody used to have alligator lizards, dude. Oh my God. I never seen a species of reptile. I don't even know how they live. The one had so many, it had to be like 200 mites on it. And I'm like, why do you even have those? But yeah, some of the wild, like the alligator lizards around there, they have mites, a species of like parasitic. Yeah, the California alligator lizards.
Cal Kings. Do any of the Cal
yes, I'd imagine Cal Kings have to have them then too, the wild ones. I would assume. Yeah, they have to get them, and then the Pituophis, the gopher snakes there would have to, and the garter snakes. But I don't know how many people are kind of whoever is anybody in this chat. Next time somebody goes herping in like South California, look for mites on all the stuff you find. So maybe we could blame California and China. So it's California and China, right? Okay, and retic people.
So, and we can do this as long as you guys want. So one last comment, a conversation I had at the Atlanta show was, what's the fungal disease in the wild for snakes? And I've seen it in Tennessee. What's that called?
Yeah, that's oh man.
I don't know the name of it, but yeah, you know what? That was like a big thing that popped up, and now you haven't heard about it in a minute. But yeah, where were they finding those? I thought they were finding some in California and other states.
Well, here's the fucked up thing. I've seen it in Nashville. I've seen it in western Wisconsin. And I believe I've actually come across it at one other herping spot. So it seems to be jumping a good bit, and that could
That's
be
not good.
our fault. Whenever I go herping with Ryan McVay, we spray bleach on our shoes, bleach on our hooks. But the reason I bring that up is, when we talk about mites in California that might have been introduced by us, I'm really surprised that fungal disease has not made its way into the hobby, considering how common it is in the wild now.
You can get fungal infections and stuff in captive reptiles. I've actually seen that in a few hognose. It doesn't spread. You just want to put this on it. If you put this shit on it, it's gone. The silver Selvadine.
Oh yeah, I've always heard that.
Take a big jar of silver Selvadine. Next time you go herping with Ryan McVay, you guys can slather this on each other. You can slather it on the snakes you find too that have any fungal disease. It'll cure them up.
I think the gentleman I was talking to this weekend, I believe he said that Lysol, they were spraying Lysol on it.
Lysol, and that's working. It looks like Dave froze up.
Oh, so like Lysol on the things that like snake hooks and that kind of thing, or on directly on the animals.
Yeah, they're finding the fungal infections like around usually their rostral, around their eyes, their face. It's usually it's around it. Oh, I think Dave's back.
Okay.
He's bringing Lotrimin foot powder to sprinkle on snakes. What? Oh, he's still breaking up. All right, he's gonna wait on it. Dave, you might have to exit and re-enter.
Yeah, I'm getting spotty as fuck. It's flicking on and off.
That's good.
Sorry, I think there's a little moment where the satellite goes behind the moon or something. I don't really know how it works.
Can't triangulate.
Yeah, but so one thing that and I hate to bring it up at the end, and Junior, cut us off whenever you're ready, but for somebody that likes the species, likes the size of the species, give us a little sales pitch. I want to hear a little bit about your setup. I want to hear about your cage size, your temperatures, cool down, feeding habits, maybe leading into breeding. Throw some at us, like a real infomercial style, buddy.
Okay. Just how to care for the Kenyans and that kind of thing.
I want you to talk. I want to buy Kenyans, buddy. Tell me what I need to do. Like, that's what I'm asking you. I want to hear Rex. Right. I want to hear it all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is, I mean, some of it you guys have already alluded to. Look, they don't get mites. You don't have to worry about crypto. They're pretty much disease free. They're almost bulletproof. They do, they stay a manageable size. They're not going to eat your cat, your dog, or your kid. And, they're, in terms of keeping them, they don't need, because of that size, they don't need a lot of space. So it's not like keeping a retic. You can keep them bioactive, or you can keep them in racks and tubs, and they'll also do well on that too. You had a question there?
Tub size, drop tub size on me that you like.
Yeah, now for the big females, I like them to be able to stretch out. I think minimum, if you're doing tubs, I like to keep them to where they can stretch all the way out, maybe a little bit further, but I would say minimum is the length of their body. Now males, they can stay in smaller. I guess if you're familiar with maybe the V10s or something like that, they do well in those because your males don't get very large. And then in terms of temperature, it's pretty easy. They can do cool end, room temp, warm in, 85, 90. Simple substrates. You can get as fancy as you want. There's a lot of people like to do different mixes and that kind of thing, but you can just do like aspen chips and they will be fine. You can do cypress mulch if you have some humidity problems. You can keep it dry, but then water it, when they shed. So you're looking at simple substrates, a water bowl and a heat source, and that's all you need. If you want to kind of, get more fancy with it, you definitely can. But they're pretty much trouble-free. They're a great beginner species to learn with. They're very forgiving because, I'd say a lot of your beginner mistakes, if you make it with this species, you got a better chance of coming out on the good end. And then the snakes do too. And so, and then as you guys have seen, we've talked about several morphs here, and there's a lot more to do with these too. and a lot more combos to make, a lot more improvements to see. And so, I mean, I think, and then you talked about the prices too, you know, that it's not like you don't need $30,000 to get in with on a new morph or something like that. And so from all these different angles, whether it's the care, the cost, you know, it seems like just an all around very attractive species to me.
So, you know, one thing too that, you know, some people don't keep in consideration, and Junior, you can pretty much tell me your experiences, but what Kenyans cost now doesn't really matter in 5 years if you guys get an influx of new buyers. You know, when it comes to supply and demand in that industry, you might find, and, you know, Junior, there's been stuff with like the black milks over the years started out at what, at 80, they jumped up to 300 at some points. I think there's a few corn snake mutations that are actually doing pretty well and went up in price that became less available. My point being is, if you're in the community already and you got an established collection and you guys get an influx of people, you guys are going to fucking clean up. The skinks did the same thing for us.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of potential in this community, I think.
Yeah. So, and, you know, we talked about new mutations do help, but I still think, you know, the fact that everything you guys have is recessive, it's going to be a long time before you guys accomplish everything you want to accomplish.
Yeah, it takes a while. You're correct.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest, like, yeah, Kenyan Sambos, I mean, I would definitely put them up there with, say, like hognose snakes as like a first species of snake to consider as, like, you know, a pet snake. If you want something that stays small and is really easy to take care of, you know, ball pythons are in that wheelhouse too. They're a little larger. But yeah, Kenyan Sambos, hognose snakes. If you want like a snake that stays like baby size, or what, you know, kind of like a layman or a newer person would consider baby size, like a male hognose, male sandboa, those stay very, very small. And also, if you ever want a snake that looks like a cow, you can't find any. Yeah, Kenyan Sambo, can't like an anery or anery paint. That is one, because you can't find any other snake out there that looks like that.
That's all we got.
Yeah, they're really cool.
Always love that one. Well, Junior, I don't know. How do you end your episodes, buddy?
Usually fairly abruptly. I tell everybody, yeah, usually I kind of like
peace out, guys. I had a great time, honestly.
Yeah, every now and then, like, okay, fuck, he did it more abrupt than normal. Yeah. So thanks, Rufus, for joining and you know, sharing information about your Sambo collection and taking the time to do this podcast with Dave and I, even though Dave's not here anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I really enjoyed having the discussion. So thank you. Yeah.
I'll see you at oh wait, and Joshua Fisher says he plug your book. You have a book?
Oh, okay. Not a book. I'm working on sort of started out as a care guide. People ask for a care guide for Russian sand boas, right?
Okay.
And anyway, in developing that, I just thought, you know, I've got a little bit more here that I can share than just in a care guide, but maybe an ebook. And so I'm working on maybe a simple ebook, you know, and that it. I don't want to say when it'll be out, but I am working on an ebook. So I'm hoping, hopefully, surely within the next year, I hope to have that out.
Well, that sounds good. Yeah. Cause it's like, especially even if it's a simple one, sometimes it's good just to summarize stuff because everybody's so busy anymore nowadays. Yeah. A lot of people don't really even want to read a novel. So if you got all the important information you need, that's really useful.
Yeah, I just wanted to be like something people could download and they could kind of go through it almost as a reference document, you know, like you're saying, be able to see, you know, what's the care like here and there, and not have to read it cover to cover, so to speak, to be able to take care of them.
Yeah, and then Fairly Hog Parents said the snake fungal disease, they think it's in 25 states now. So that's pretty crazy. And then Michael Underwood, thanks for being here, Mike. Fountain City Hognose. And actually, Mike, for giving me this mic. Thanks, Mike, for the mic. Cool. And he asked, he goes, so is that show good or bad for you, for all y'all? Will you be back? Will you be back, Rufus?
I will. I plan to be back there when they have it again, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's got potential.
All right, I'll be back too. Really like Bob. I like all of Bob's antics, and he's a very fun person. Mm-hmm. Like everything Bob stands for. I like the show, and so I'll be back. And thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again, Rufus. I think we'll leave it at that. I think we covered pretty much everything. It was a really good show, and thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
And I'm going to end the stream.